Everybody, welcome to the August 27th biweekly-ish working group LTS meeting. We haven't had one of these in a little bit because of KubeCon or Kubernetes releases and a few other things. So welcome back. And if anybody is joining us for the first time, welcome as well. I see Tim Pepper has joined us. I don't think you've been here in a little while, so welcome, Tim. Looks like Tim's connecting to audio twice.
Second one's probably his mic.
Yeah. All right. Looks like we added the proposal from Mo as a discussion topic again. Do we want to summarize where we left off with discussing that before?
I'm trying to remember. I don't think we made it all the way through.
Yeah, I think we were like halfway through the comments. I haven't looked at the agenda. Are there other topics? I don't
Nope.
want to. Okay. There were other topics I would say let's talk about those first, just so we get through them. Well, let's see. I'm trying to remember how far we got down this doc. I feel like we were maybe halfway through the comments or something like that.
Do you want me to share my screen with the doc and we can walk through it that way, or everybody?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I remember talking about the CDSS rating. I don't remember talking about the security response stuff. So maybe that was about where we are.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to comment on as well. I think CVSS is what we discussed the last, and we didn't proceed after that. At least I don't remember.
Yeah, so I guess we discussed this about a month ago because my last comment is from July 30th, and we're about at August 30th-ish. But yeah, so I remember talking about that we wanted to be a little bit more particular. For example, we would take things like CVSS into consideration, and for example, intersect that with how difficult was the fix to backport and stuff, and use all of those to decide if it was reasonable to make such a backport, or if we were going to make things even worse than they were before in the process of backporting. So I do remember that conversation. And so that is on, like, since these are, by the way, are we recording? No, we're not recording.
We are, I think.
Oh yeah, it is being recorded. Yeah. I'm not recording it. That's why it doesn't say. Thanks, Zoom. Excellent UX. But so I do plan on going back through the old recording and updating the doc with all of our conversation, because I don't think necessarily all of it got captured into the comments. So I do remember that. And then, so I can see my own comments on this part. So maybe, I think this is where we were. So like Micah, you're here. So we discussed this briefly in SRC before, and the 8 of us or maybe the 6 of us that were actually there at that meeting didn't really have concerns. I think somewhere in this doc, I think Jordan, you had said like, does SRC have budget for this stuff? I am trying to track that down because I can't actually tell how much budget we have, because the value I see in HackerOne is clearly not large enough to cover any reasonable kind of bounty. So I'm like, is this like a wishing well, where if I just keep issuing bounties, someone from CNCF just keeps putting money in here? Because I've never had to actually worry about it. But the number is too tiny right now. So we'll figure that part out. The other part is I was poking at our contact at HackerOne for them to give me some of the raw data that I can't seem to figure out how they collected, just so it'd be more specific instead of wishy-washy. I'm like, well, we spend this much money per year, and we think we would now have spent this much more money per year or something. So it's kind of, but I think overall from the SRC side, I don't think we have many concerns outside of possibly budget, if mostly because we don't know what the budget is. I guess Rita commented that we would have to send out 6 patches instead of 3, which sounds awful, but doable. Hopefully we get lucky and there's not too many merge conflicts. Micah, any thoughts, comments on the SRC piece?
I don't think so. Not yeah. We discussed it, but I think you summed it up pretty well.
Okay. Oh, I had one comment. I think that was earlier in the doc somewhere, but I don't think we discussed it last time. So I wanted to bring that up real quick. So for me, the way I would hope, I guess, something like this could be adopted would be purposefully non-retroactive. So say this was adopted in like 133. The first release of 133 would be the one that was under this policy, but all like 132 and everything before that would retain whatever it had instead of like retroactively getting longer. To me, that felt like a much more reasonable way of on-ramping a proposal than blanketly changing what old things were being done in whatever way, especially since you could have already torn down CI for certain things that could theoretically be under support. But I suspect someone reading this document might not perceive that as the
Yeah,
approach.
that's good to call out explicitly. I agree that's a reasonable way to do it. That's how we've done other things in the past, like extending support to 12 to 14 months.
Yep.
Or extending node SKU support to 3 versions. Like we said, the current version is the one that will gain this increased SKU support or whatever.
Okay.
But yes, you should write it explicitly.
Yeah. Only the
It might be good to also state that retroactive application of this is an explicit non-goal, just in case people think, well, surely it's implied.
yeah. Yeah, I mean that was the concern that I had there. I was like, I'm sure someone has really got some wishful thinking going on that, hey, like my old cluster is magically going to be in support now. Okay, so that part's there. Key stakeholders. Yes, I guess SIG docs has to have longer maintenance of doc branches. That makes sense.
I know the last bullet point here kind of is like, and everybody else who shares code, which is true. But it would probably be good to look at the Kubernetes changes that have required backports and see if those fall predominantly on some SIGs more than others, and like actually go talk through this with them and say what would it have looked like for you to take those back 3 more versions? Like, were they reasonable backports? Is your code changing and you would have had to rewrite them? So I think storage and node are probably the 2 I see taking thorny fixes back.
I think we have I think internally we were doing analysis to figure out which SIGs had the most things so that we could, like for our internal support of LTS, like figure out where we wanted people to ramp up and understand things. I think we have the data for that.
Okay.
If not, I'm pretty sure we do. So I'll try to find that, and then we can use that to try to target attending SIG meetings for those. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, or at least like send it to their mailing list, Slack, like ask for comments and then probably follow up with the discussion. I don't see, I'm not sure which of these would be like dependency updates. I guess that's SIG architecture code organization. I don't really, code organization handles like the approach for it, but those people are the ones mostly doing dependency bumps, I guess. So maybe like that group.
Micah, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just I didn't see it in here, and I just was curious. What are we thinking about deprecated features? Like, are deprecated features? Oh, I'm also getting extended support, or if we like, I'm thinking of like Git repo as a example. Like, would we want to continue to fix bugs there, or would we just say it's deprecated, so we're not fixing it?
I guess, I mean, can you, so right now this, the whole thing is only really covering security stuff. So like, are you saying a security issue in a deprecated feature?
Yes, yes.
I mean, so like I'm thinking about like KMS V1, like it's deprecated. So I wouldn't like fix like random stuff in it, but I would probably like if it was a bad CVE, I think we'd fix it.
Yeah, like if it's a CVE, but if we follow the approach earlier in the doc, like if there's a security issue found that has a CVE that we fix in current master and current branches, like I think we would take it back if it was feasible.
If it's a feature that's not in master and current branches, that's like removed.
Ah.
Like if we hypothetically like remove that feature already, but it was found and it's still in a version that's in this extended support.
So we wouldn't backport a removal of the feature. But
right.
If a new vulnerability was found in a feature that has since been removed, I think that has to be in scope. That's part of like why I was a little surprised to not see more discussion of that in the security response committee bullet. It's like, yeah, you're adding another year of things that we could have removed entirely that people could still find issues with, new issues with. Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah. So
Or from another point of view, it is great because isn't that the exact reason that a lot of these customers want LTS?
Well, if we've resolved issues with problematic things by having a path to deprecation and migration and removal, and people are still sticking on 2-year-old versions that haven't adopted the better, more secure thing, making it easier for them to stick on those 2-year-old versions doesn't seem like a great thing to me. So
I'm not saying it's good. I'm saying it's the reason people want LTS with security fixes is because their cadence of upgrade is not what we would prefer it to be.
Yeah, it feels a little bit enabling to then say it's fine, we'll make it more comfortable for you to stay on that version. I don't know.
Tim Pepper, go ahead.
There isn't a clear note of from where the patch to be backported would come. So I'm wondering if maybe part of the answer here might be in that. And if you were to say the patch will only be backported from the main branch, then certain things fall out of scope because the patch is not possible there because the code has been removed. I don't know that that's the right answer, but I think that needs to nailed down.
We've kind of hit this in the past, actually, with vulnerability fixes to dependencies that no longer applied to master. So once we dropped like some of the cloud provider stuff out of master, I forget which cloud it was. There was a vulnerability fix. And it's like, oh, we don't even have that dependency in master, but we do in our like N-1 minor. So we still did dependency bumps for that. So maybe it doesn't have to be master, but maybe it has to be like one of the standard branches. It's still relevant, so we make a patch. I don't know. But yeah, clarifying that would help.
And then I do think it's almost inevitable that there's going to be a CVE that goes by where the fix is removing the feature. And that maybe conflicts with simple notions of backporting fix and having something under support. I think in that case, it's a beneficial fix from the project's perspective because it's not maintaining something, but it is in that same spectrum of how much actual support is being given to those older old branches.
Yeah. The only time I can think of in the past where we've done stuff like that is we said like this will be removed eventually once we sort of do it on a minor boundary with sufficient notice. In the meantime, here's a way to turn off the feature. So we backported the way to turn off the feature, but we didn't change the defaults so that people could upgrade patch releases without behavior changing automatically under them. But yeah.
Would you propose that for something that's in the first 14 months but deprecated? I assume not. You wouldn't just say, well, it's deprecated, it's got a CVE bug, we're just going to remove it. So
no,
I think it's just a fundamental, like, do we fix CVEs and deprecated features or not?
Yeah, the cases I'm thinking of is where the vulnerability is inherent to the feature. It's like if you resolve the vulnerability, you cannot have this feature anymore. Like there's no way to fix the vulnerability and still leave the feature. So the best we could do was say, well, if this vulnerability impacts your use, you can turn off the feature.
Yeah.
Then there's things like queue control copy or something where many vulnerabilities reported over the years, but resolvable while still having the core functionality of the command, right?
Does the bug bounty describe what is in scope for that, and would that give any guidance?
For what?
For bug bounty. So if bug bounty doesn't consider something a bug, then that kind of, I guess, implicitly is something that wouldn't get a backport. And maybe it talks about don't go hunting ancient code or deprecated features.
I think bug bounty is just going to look at these rules. Like we're just going to say like what is in scope.
Yeah, I can link to the.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it had some existing limitations or something that might be handy to parallel here.
Yeah, I'll link to the doc that has the scope. See if I can find anything. It's long. I'll just link to it.
Yeah, I just dropped the link in the chat.
Thanks.
For the scope.
Maybe we can copy that into the agenda too.
Can someone link that into this doc as well? I can't see the chat because I'm sharing.
Yeah,
my
I will.
screen. Thank you.
Trying to see if it talks about attacks against, yeah, so right now it says attacks against a stable and supported Kubernetes release. So it's the most recent 3 releases. So if it only existed in master, it hadn't been released yet, it wouldn't be eligible. If it existed only in things that had expired, open source support, it wouldn't be in scope currently.
And
But with this, it would.
There's GA, beta, and alpha.
Yeah, and alpha, the first thing it says, only beta and GA unless explicitly excluded below. So alpha things that aren't on by default aren't in scope for a bounty, I guess. Yeah. So maybe some specific, maybe updating this to say like, we'll use this language from the bounty scope, or we would need to change the bounty scope in these ways. to make adjustments if this was accepted.
Since we don't currently know what the bug bounty budget is, would we adjust the scope to a good, better, best, depending on what budget we end up with?
Maybe find out what the budget is, and then depending on what we find out, we can figure out what or what not to do. I don't know.
Mike, have you ever had any issue with budget? I don't think we've ever really even considered the budget when giving out bounties.
We haven't. Let me try and find it really quick.
Yeah, it's one of the few things in HackerOne that I can't see because it's like you don't have access to billing. And I was like, I guess that makes sense.
Really?
Pretty sure it's just a credit card.
I thought that, okay. I thought there was, yeah, I remember seeing it before. I do remember seeing like, here's how much you have.
I vaguely recall it's I forget.
It was in like a sidebar.
Yeah, our CNCF rep, Chris, I can't remember, starts with an A. I don't remember his last name, but
And check.
pretty sure his credit card is just sitting in HackerOne as like, this is how we bill CNCF. Yep. Okay. I guess so we talked about SRC while we were looking that up. So we got let's see a lot of conversation on the comment for Kate's infra, and let's see. So Marco, I see you're here. I don't know if you want to talk to some of your comments. It's a pretty long thread.
Yeah, sure. So let me see where we are at the moment. Yeah. Okay, so we will have to figure out who's going to maintain the jobs. I mean, we definitely create them, eventually change like the frequency from the SIG release side, but we will definitely need SIG testing and yeah, mainly SIG testing to maintain that.
I'm trying to remember what if you had mentioned this before, Jeremy. Were we trying to figure out some kind of way of measuring the cost increase for running CI based on the existing CI?
Yeah, there's not a really good way to do that with the metrics that are there today. I think the only real way to do this would be to look at spend when one of those branches is turned off, but we haven't been really good about turning them off. So some of the older releases have had the CI continue to run for a little bit extra. Like I think when we turned 127 off, 126 had still been running as well. Yes, I don't think there's a really good metric that we can like easily look at. We can do some kind of inferencing around the reports, but I don't think there's anything that like really gives us a really clear picture of what that looks like.
So yeah, we definitely don't have a good way to measure this because we have a CKT infra earlier. We investigated some tools like KubeCost, but they didn't work out. But the thing is that from my point of view, the biggest thing that is maybe some other comment as well is how often do we run those jobs? And given that we are talking about LTS, running them every day doesn't make any sense perhaps because we don't expect changes on LTS branches to happen many of them. I
Right.
don't know, but I would expect very little of them compared to what we see on the supported branches, the fully supported branches. So I say that this is something that we perhaps need to look first into before we can look into what's the cost. Like, what's the ideal way we can maybe even make those jobs to be like only when triggered manually, or maybe once a month, or maybe once a week, like to try to figure out how often do we run them. I mean, perhaps if you ask me, as long as Prowl keeps the history of jobs so we can rerun them manually when needed, is good enough for LTS CI. And that shouldn't be expensive. Like, I wouldn't really consider that a huge cost, especially as Jeremy said, we have been running for quite legacy branches jobs because we don't have a good tooling to deal with that. And it wasn't that huge problem.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the frequency of these things could be tuned way down. Maintaining the jobs is another story. I think like making sure that those things still work and that there's nothing that breaks and Prow continues to do the things like that overhead is still there from a maintainer standpoint, but the actual infrastructure cost probably drops down quite a bit.
I would comment on the code part of the test. Like, I don't expect, because we are again talking about LTS that doesn't change much. I don't expect the test itself to get broken. Like, it's if it passed like a month ago, it should still work. The biggest thing that's going to be hard to maintain is like supported operating systems. Like, test uses some operating system over the course of 2 years, it can be gone. Like, the image doesn't exist, just that stuff. Such stuff is going to be a bit the most trickiest. But I guess this is something that we have. This really depends on what jobs are doing, and I'm not sure if we have enough of insights. Like, we should probably ask SIG testing to tell us, like, hey, do you think that those jobs can run for 2 years or something like that? And that they provide us feedback if there's anything in job that can get broken, and we based on that try to decide like what we can do with jobs.
Would we
Wait,
mostly
is
be
that a,
oh, sorry, Roger, go ahead.
sorry, is that a periodic question? I kind of feel like if the answer to the question, do you think this has any potential of breaking? The answer will change over time. So I'm curious if that's a one and done question or like something we poll periodically.
I mean, given the test doesn't change, I would hope that the answer doesn't change. Like, we can look into the test, see what it does, and try to identify some spots that might break. And given the test doesn't change, then it shouldn't be a problem. But given that Kubernetes code adds new features, stuff like that, we might have to revisit it for new versions from time to time.
Would these just be the release blocking jobs? Or are there other sets of things that we would be interested in running?
Eventually releasing forming, maybe to some degree, and we will have the pre-submits.
Yeah, we have the history of these forked per miner, so we could look and see how often are changes having to be made for in master to react to Kubernetes changes. That would probably tell us something useful. But then we could also look at how did we ever have to make changes to these once they were forked for a miner and just sort of sailed off into the sunset. My impression is we don't generally have to. I can think of maybe 1 or 2 times when we made sort of a systemic change, like when we started testing additional Go versions, the original Go version, we backfilled once to say like, all right, look at the existing miner jobs and like run also on the original Go version. But I don't think we're touching the job config on miner branches.
I think there was a change related to the infrastructure moving.
Oh, okay.
So like the last round of patch releases, we had 2 failing jobs on the 128 branch, I think, and it was because something didn't get brought back correctly. But I think that's also a pretty rare circumstance.
So to Bridget's question, I don't think it's just a point in time. Like, considering what happens over time is great.
Yeah.
We do have history that I think we could use to sort of estimate whether that would have to be done or how often that would have to be done. Yeah, if we could gather the most of the discussion seems to be focused on like there are specific things to pin down to actually understand what the costs would be and who would do them. So figuring out what those specific things were and putting names on those to do the investigation and come back with, yeah, we checked and here's why we think this is fine, or we checked and, oh, this is going to be terrible and here's why we think it's going to be terrible. That would make it easier to sort of make decisions on whether this was bearable.
Could somebody summarize the last little bit? Because I think I maybe didn't have as much context, so I lost like a little bit of my train of thought trying to figure out what we were specifically trying to measure.
I think we were talking
I'm
about
putting a slight
oh.
summary in the agenda, but I think Jordan can probably go in and correct it. Go ahead and summarize aloud as well.
Marco was talking about like the CI that we run, like whether we could tune the periodics to run less frequently to make the cost lower, and then what the maintenance of the actual job configs would be. We need to figure out if we expect there to be work there to make tweaks to those job configs to keep them running, both the pre-submits and the periodics. And we can look at sort of the 14-month history of our existing minor branch job configs to see if we typically have to mess with those configs over the lifetime or not.
Okay, so the intent would be that we want to try to extrapolate from the 14-month to say, okay, well, this is what it took for 14, and it was basically kind of idle. So maybe it could work for 24, but it's still an approximation because theoretically stuff could come up within those months that never came up before because, well, it was never that long.
Yes, like, so we have history. We should go back more than just the 14 months of the current miners, right? We should look at the last few years of the project and say, like, how often does something systemic change where we have to go mess with old miner job configs, whatever those miners are at the time. So Jeremy mentioned like the infrastructure change. I knew of when we added the Go compatibility variants. So we know that's happened a couple times, a few times, getting a feel for how often that is what we're looking for.
Okay.
I added that as a comment after your other discussion point, Mo.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so if we're done with like SIG testing and infra, I think now would be a SIG release. And I think there had been times where we discussed if we would continue to release binary artifacts for these longer supported ones, or just have like well-maintained and well-tested branches, but building and that stuff was up to like left as an exercise to the reader. I think to me, what was unclear is what is the exact cost of doing a release? Because I don't do releases, so I don't actually know what the cost is.
Yeah, I think the actual cost of the release is probably not that much. Whatever the cost of running the Google Cloud build job is, plus the additional storage of the artifacts, which is probably not that much. From a time perspective, right now we have some inefficiencies around image promotion that kind of extend the process. So like it is fairly time intensive from whatever release manager is doing things. And I replied to Rita's comment above about doing 6 releases instead of 3. Like that would extend the time that release managers are spending. And we would very likely need to like spread it across time zones because we have to run the image promotions serially because we run into rate limits. And it's just it's like that whole thing should be rewritten and made better. outside of this, but like if we're going to do this, we definitely should invest in making the image promotion process better. So I would say like the costs are probably not that much from like, you know, hosting binaries and doing the release. It's the toil for maintainers that are doing the releases themselves, like the release managers. I don't know if Marco has a different. Oh, you have your hand up, Marco. Go ahead.
Yeah, I find this topic to be very lovely because it's close to SIG release, and I agree with Jeremy. Pretty much everything he said. I would add about the image promotion. We hope to fix it, so I wouldn't really consider it as a blocker in this case, but as a something to pay attention until that is not fixed. The other thing that I would bring here is like, do we have any other option? Because there have been some discussion about having only git tag, like we just do the tag, that's it. We don't create the images, we don't create the binaries, we don't push anything. But I would rather take this opportunity to ask, if it wouldn't cut releases, like if it just do the tag, is that really useful to anyone? Because if someone knows how to build the Kubernetes binaries and how to publish everything and how to create all the things, I would argue that they also know how to cherry pick something and bring the fix to their own fork. So it's not really bringing the value that we just do that, because those users who really need that, and those are who might not have experience to maintain something or to create the release or something like that, will not benefit from this at all. Like they will see the git tag, no binaries, no images, they can't use that.
Right.
So I would say that going without proper releases is probably going to quite significantly impact what we are doing here and actually not provide any value to the users. And I think that we don't want that.
Yeah, I think that the effort of making the branches up to date is the bigger overall effort, right? Getting the patches and stuff. I don't think actually cutting the binaries and the images really complicates the process much more. And it would definitely make this less beneficial to consumers of Kubernetes.
Wasn't one of the objections to cutting the binaries and then storing and providing and hosting and distributing them around costs, not necessarily production costs, but storage and distribution costs? I think I want to separate those two because I think that the latter does exist, unless I'm mistaken.
I mean, there's a cost for it, but we host those things today anyway. Like for any of the out of support branches, we already have all of those things in registries. We never delete them or clean them up, so I don't think it would decrease it much.
Well, the question is, are there people who are not using the binary we host on those because they have to
Upgrade? Yeah.
cherry pick their own dependency updates and build their own and use their own images? And if we were doing it, it'd be like, oh, finally, I can stop running my own registry and just use the community hosted binaries. I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a small subset. Maybe not though. Maybe that's an actually huge number, but it seems like that would be a not huge increase. Marco, you had your hand up before Tim, but you put it down. Do you still have
Yeah,
something?
I just want to say that I actually plus one what you said. And I also believe I was speaking about the same concern that you just said, Jeremy, about if it is a small subset of users, that I would actually agree, because someone who already has infrastructure for everything and like can build the Kubernetes releases and stuff like that and can cherry pick whatever they want and whenever they want to do that, I'm not really sure they're going to tune it down and just rely on upstream. So I wouldn't really consider it as a great risk.
Tim, go ahead.
Going back up to motivation and goals at the top of the document, it notes that various members of the community work on downstream forks. And I feel like a lot of the conversation around LTS has been not so much end user value driving as thinking about how to better amortize the cost of downstream forks and the potential risks in greater diversity and patch content of those forks. But I don't know if I'm reading too much into that on the motivations and goals. If that is a part of what the desire is here, I feel like artifact generation isn't necessary because those downstream forks are most likely still going to exist but be more aligned. So having the point to the tag from which they align is actually a notable value, I think.
I guess in my head I was kind of hoping for both things, right? Is that we reduce duplicated effort across the folks maintaining forks, but also I think there's a large set of people that consume just vanilla open source Kubernetes releases, because if there weren't, then we wouldn't bother building them in the first place. So it feels like we have the opportunity to help both sides without necessarily changing the proposal dramatically, in a sense. So it seems higher value to do it that way. I did, I tried to be clear, right? Like I expect that, certainly it would be beneficial to me downstream as one person, responsible for maintaining this stuff. But, if I have the choice of doing the same work upstream versus downstream, it makes sense to me to do it upstream. But I also expect every one of us needs our forks just for embargoed fixes and whatever, doohickey random things sometimes people end up having to do for their environment.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those aren't going to go away.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are at time now. Do folks want to continue talking about this for a few more minutes, or should we park here and then pick it up next time, or pick it up on the mailing list?
9+1 up to 15 minutes, like to full hour, we can probably go on from my side.
Okay. I need to drop. So I have a hard stop now, but I'll make somebody else the host and we can keep going. If that's the
given that I have to drop, Jeremy has to drop, Jordan has to drop, I think we should pause here.
okay.
But I'm excited to bring this up at our next meeting and continue. This is great analysis. I think we're really diving into the important details.
Okay, so I will follow up with our internal mapping of CVEs to SIG, try to get the prioritization of where we should share this next, and then I'll drop that into the Slack channel and the mailing list just to give an update of stuff from there.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Great.
Can you
Thank
just
you all so
put
much.
somewhere like that we know where we stopped, like if you can put something like we stopped here or something like that,
Yeah.
so we don't spoil.
Oh, sure.
How about this?
Yeah.
Stopped here, 8:27.
Yeah,
Great.
great. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you
thanks
so
everybody.
much.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.